Hello, Teddy Bear. Um, we have a guest. Would you like to introduce the show? Lovely. Okay, so it's welcome to Pet Talk with me, Anna, and who are you? Teddy. And we would love to welcome our wonderful guest, who's our, there we go. And I'm going to struggle because your name, is it
It's
Sowjanya?
Sowjanya. Yeah.
Danya, okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. So now you are in India, and you have your company is called Dog Promise, which I love. Um, and I think one of the reasons why I am so drawn to your work is because you do have a promise, and the promise is to the dogs, to help them be better understood. So here you are. And in particular, I saw you talking with the wonderful Andrew Hale on his platform about, well, the introduction of new dogs into what a household that already has dogs. So I think that's a really important subject. What drew your interest to this area of dog care, if I can call it that?
Firstly, thank you so much, Anna, for the introduction. And I'm so glad that we're talking about this conversation. What drew me to this area? I think, like a lot of us, I think I was struggling with my own dogs. I was quite clueless about how to go about, raising my two dogs. And interestingly, it happened when I brought my second dog home, and the dynamics changed, and I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what I needed to do. And then I came across Sindur, who is the founder and director at Barks, and I think rest is history is how we could say it as a cliche, but I think the way Sindur talks about it in terms of taking care of dogs, I think made just the most logical sense to me, but also it was the way I wanted to build the relationship with my dogs. So it kind of just came together, but I would say that bringing my second dog home and then everything becoming confusing was probably the starting point for me.
It's a big thing, isn't it? Because for the resident dog who has kind of worked out their place within the family, within the house, suddenly to have another dog come in is very distressing. And Teddy has never had that experience, but he has had friends come to stay. And that the very first time that ever happened was one of his good friends. And normally what happens is that when friends come to visit, they bring their families with them. On this occasion, we collected our lovely friend after a walk and brought him home with us. And he knew instantly that this was different. And what happened was we got in, there had been a massive rainstorm, and the two boys came in, and I handed them over to my partner, and I said, I need to get changed because I was drenched. And I ran upstairs to the bedroom, and he toweled them down. Both of them came upstairs, and then our little guest left, and then Teddy left. And I thought they had left to go downstairs to the kitchen together. No. Teddy went into the lounge on his own to have a little sob. I could hear him doing this little whimpering cry. So I had to come down and talk to him and reassure him. And then we went down into the kitchen together, and both dogs were given chews separately, I might add. And that was the beginning, but I had to be very careful because every time, and of course the sofa, as you can imagine, is a prized resource. So every time our friend was on the sofa, Teddy was very hesitant to come up And it was like he was asking me, am I still allowed up there? And so I said yes. I just made sure that I was in between them and they both had access to me and to the sofa, and everything was went swimmingly for the first 2 days. But I that gave me a real taste of how Teddy would feel about having to share his home permanently.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a brilliant story, and I love how vividly you have described it, because I think a lot of us might have had similar experiences. I think so. Now I have my older dog is not with us anymore, Sammy, but we do have our younger dog, Zoe. And then we have three street dogs, our free roaming dogs, who come in and out. And I see this play out so much, with them, that I think one of the first mistakes I made with Sammy and Zoe was that we never included Sammy in the decision of bringing another dog home, whether he's okay or not. Um, Being there when we decided, who's the dog who's going to come home, and, you know, what kind of a dog would be the right fit for our family, but also for, when I say for our family, then it's also Sammy, not just like the humans making that decision. And I think that was one of the first, mistakes we made while we are talking about like a multi-dog household. Of course, like there were a lot of other mistakes we made as a, caregiver, but with the multi-dog household dynamic, I think the first mistake was not to include Sammy in that entire process, because I think as things started unfolding for the two of them, and when I was consulting with Sindhu, she was, consulting back then, and she was practicing. And one of the first things that popped up for us was that Sammy was already struggling with pain. He was about 5 or 6 years old, and I'm talking about signs of pain on my page, the last few days. And he was already showing signs of pain, and Zoe was a very young, energetic puppy who had that puppy energy, and Sammy was struggling with pain. And in hindsight, a young dog, an energetic dog, would not have been the right fit for Sammy. If we were to do this all over again, that would probably not have been the right decision. So I can see that I think one of the first mistakes, and I think this is not an intentional mistake a lot of us make, right? I mean, we just assume and believe that our dog is just going to be okay with the decision and would be okay with any dog that comes home, especially because of, I think, unfair expectations on our dogs, that they are friendly and they need to be friendly with everybody, and they should be okay with the decisions of the house. And I think like bringing home another family member is a big decision itself, but I think even the smaller decisions that we make in the house, like just moving around furniture, is also not a decision we make with the dogs in the picture, right? So there are a lot of dogs who would come into a house where the furnitures are moved around and then get very confused. So I think even the smaller decisions we don't even like have our dogs part of it. Bringing home another family member is a huge decision, because it just changes the dynamics in the family, because you have another dog, how that dog gels with the entire family, with the humans, how the older resident dog is already with the humans, and how that changes, and how the two dogs get along. There's so much that changes. And I feel like, I think it's such a big decision to not involve our dogs, but I know that none of us are doing it intentionally. I think it's just the way we believe it's going to be. We believe dogs are friendly, we believe dogs adjust and adapt, and so it's okay, they will get along, or we can train them to get along. And I think yeah, I think that would be my first ever mistake as a, parent to multiple dogs.
Listening to you made me think about situations, blended families where there's children on, from previous marriages. And if they're having to suddenly integrate the children, how challenging that can be. Or even just bringing a new partner into the household and having to deal with the children that are there. That's really, and I think what we're saying is we owe our dogs the same sensitivity because they have their feelings too. You know, Teddy was hurt. He felt hurt. He was having a little cry. He wasn't being angry with his friend or aggressive to his friend, but he was confused and he needed help. And subsequently, most of his friends have stayed here at some point or other, and he's fine with that because now he understands they will go home, and that's fine. But I don't think he'd appreciate a newcomer in, and we've talked about this a lot. We have, haven't we? And we always come to the same conclusion that actually he's quite happy being on his own. So for Teddy, I think that is the best solution. He loves having guests, but that's where it stops. Now, what do we do? So you had this situation where you were talking, I mean, this is the complexity of it, the needs not matching. And people often do this, don't they? They have an older dog and they bring in a puppy, and the energy levels don't match. And if the older dog is already experiencing some pain issues or discomfort issues, then that makes it very difficult. So what did you do? How did you address this tension?
So I think firstly it was just understanding that the two dogs have very different needs. I think just the understanding of it, because I think we were not even aware that these two individual dogs, and I won't even talk about like the age difference. Of course the age difference is there, and because of the difference in ages they have very different needs. But just like I have friends and clients who have dogs who are very similar ages. I have friends and clients who have dogs uh, from the same litter, right? Or they have dogs of very different ages, right? Like one very senior dog and one very young dog, and different breeds, different, all of it, right? Different genders. I think it comes down to the fact that these are two different individuals, and they have their own personality, they have their own preferences, they have their own needs, they have their own triggers. So I think just the acknowledgement that they don't have to be the same. So I don't need to I mean, I can't be, of course it helps if I can feed them the same things. It helps if I can have the same activities. It helps if I can have the same kind of routine for both of them, but it may not actually turn out to be that. And I think that is what happened with Sammy and Zoe, that I think Sammy had already reached his point of this zen adulthood, that I don't want to do anything, you feed me and I get to sleep and I get my walk and I get to be with my humans, and that's more than enough, I don't need anything else, kind of a phase. But Zoe was just exploring, like she was just opening her eyes to the world and then figuring it out. But we also know that those young dogs also need sleep, and I think Zoe was also a dog who had very high tactile connection needs. Sammy did not need that. He was happy being, alone by himself, being independent. So I think just recognizing their different needs and being able to model their lifestyle, their environment to cater to both their individual needs. So I think, um, Sammy didn't need to be walked multiple times. Zoe would have preferred to go outdoors and then do a lot of more sniffing. So can we have different schedules for them? Can we walk them separately? Again, I had that privilege where we were four people caring for two dogs, so we could uh, manage it between the four of us. Some people don't. They are probably the only caregiver for multiple dogs. So again, what is your support system looking like? How are you able to implement it? We didn't need to feed them different, food till much later when Sammy needed, very specialized diet. So I think once we start recognizing that they can have different needs and we're able to cater to their different needs, I think that a lot of their lifestyle become common also, and a lot of it becomes individualized as well. And I think that made a lot of difference, to be able to cater to their individualized needs, while obviously 70-80% of their life was very similar because they lived in very similar environments with same humans, and having very similar routine and schedules and everything, but we still were managing to cater to their individual requirements. So Zoe got a lot of chewing and like sniffing, because also she's a very 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 intelligent and smart dog, very. So we had to also make the house in such a way that it's safe for both dogs, because extra intelligent and smart dog means that they can get into places that may not be safe for them. So we had to also do that, right? While catering to their individual needs, also making it safe for both of them. So I think just learning that they can have different needs and what those different needs can look like, and what they can be like. And it doesn't need to do, I mean, it doesn't need to be big in terms of any big changes. It can be just very small, mindful changes. And I think it won't feel like an effort when we realize that it's not too many things need to change, or not the big things. And I think that once we recognize that they had very different needs and what it looked like, I think we managed pretty well after that, once we recognized it.
It's about understanding the different needs and then making the adjustments necessary to meet them. So some dogs are very clear in how they feel about things. Others might seem to be going along and going along until something really upsets them, and then that's it. For those who have dogs who are less expressive, shall we say, how how do we know whether they're happy or not happy?
um So I think one, I would say, and I guess Sammy was this kind of a dog. He was very tolerant in terms of no matter what we did with him, around him, he was very tolerant about it, till a point where he would just not like the fact that Zoe is around him. And I think that uh, realization also meant that I reset my expectations, that it's okay if my dogs are not friends, and it's okay for them to just be safe and cordial. So I don't think even till the end Sammy had a very positive feeling towards Zoe. He was mostly like how we would imagine siblings to be, right? Like these siblings who are like, oh, I have to like spend my time with this person, I don't like them that very much, but they're bound by the family, by being under the same roof. So they get along. But Sammy was definitely protective of Zoe, so it was not like he didn't like her or he hated her. It's just that he never had like a positive feeling towards her. So I think resetting the expectations that it's okay if my dog does not have positive feelings about it, and they are okay. I mean, they can sulk like how Teddy was sulking, and it's okay to sulk a little bit because the situation warranted sulking, and situation warranted being upset or sad about it. And I think it's a fair emotion to have, but as long as they're safe around each other, they're not creating a risk for anybody, and then even that can be managed. I think I spoke about Potter and Weasley in Andy's group, dog centered care, where we spoke about how these two dogs who were okay then had like a major conflict and like a breakdown of relationship, and then came back to a place where they can have conflict, but a very healthy conflict. And I think that would probably be a good resetting of expectations. So I think one would be that recognizing that a change in family by having a new family member, which is a new dog, can actually affect your dog. So being more mindful of them, being aware of their changing behaviors, changing interactions, with the humans in the house, how they're feeling around the house, what they're like, how you were quite aware of Teddy's, change in mood, change in, the way he moved about the house, what was, what he felt like, yes, this entire house, I can go about wherever, without any questions, to now being like, okay, am I allowed here? And, getting that reassurance from his caregiver that, yes, of course, and I'm here to like protect you and save you and be, keep you safe. And I think being that mindful of the changes that your dog is going to feel, I think itself sets a great foundation for how they're going to start feeling about the entire situation. And I think this is very similar to how kids feel, right? Like, when they're like an older sibling and a new sibling is here, like a younger, baby, baby sister, baby brother. And then they start feeling like, okay, am I feeling neglected? I feel very conflicting emotions about this new baby in the picture. And how are my parents, like, are they here for me? Can I still rely on them? Am I feeling neglected? I think these are like very valid emotions that probably even our dogs face. So I think the same mindfulness that we would apply for kids, I think if we could be mindful of our especially the dogs who are already part of our family, um I think you can set them on a great path while resetting our expectations that maybe they may not become like the best of friends. Maybe they will have very different, individualized life while sharing the same space. And sometimes, like Sammy and Zoe, they ended up in a house and then had to build a relationship and then had to feel comfortable around each other. Zoe had like a lot of love for Sammy. She loved him. But because of their initial interaction, she was also scared of him because she was not sure whether he appreciates her coming very close. So she always maintained distance in the sense that there was always a few inches of space between them. Even if they were sleeping very close, there was always that space because she respected his need for space, but she also loved him dearly. And he felt protectiveness towards her, but not like he loved her presence. So I think there are various ways the relationship can evolve between the two dogs as well. So I think resetting our expectations, I think I became comfortable with the idea that okay, fine, they're cordial, they're safe, and that's what I need, because I don't want the added, you know pressure of not being safe around each other and hurting each other, and then having to like work around that. I don't think I had that bandwidth at that time, which meant that okay, cordial, great, like I can take this, right? And then they had very different relationships evolve for each other, and different emotions that they had for each other.
Just listening to you, a number of things came to mind. But when you were talking about the fact that they were protective of each other, but didn't necessarily want to be in each other's company, you know, they're in families. There are family members that we find somewhat challenging sometimes. And we don't necessarily want to spend too much time with them, but they're family. And we have that sense. And if we heard somebody else bad mouthing them, we would not be happy, because they're part of the family. And I was listening to you talking about your dogs. It made me think of that situation, because dogs are extremely loyal to their packs. And so, to me, the fact that they feel protective of each other already says that they've accepted that they are part of each other's pack, that, yeah, we're in this together. I don't necessarily like being around you because I think you're a bit mad because your energy is off the scale compared to what I want to do. But I've got your back, And I think that's such a telling thing. The other thing that I was thinking about, because you mentioned the case study that you presented, and if I remember correctly, one of the things that led to the oversensitivity of one of the dogs, and then to the reactivity of to the other dog, was that they had an incident where they were attacked by a dog outside the house. And I think, there's all these different factors, aren't there? Because that relationship might have worked out better, but before it had a chance to sort itself out. There was a big trauma for one of the dogs.
Yeah. And I think uh that was a very telling factor in that case study, that maybe sometimes the relationship between the two dogs and how it turns out is not necessarily what's happening between them. It has a lot to do with what's happening outside of them as well. I think in Sammy and Zoe's case, it was Sammy's internal pain and Zoe's energy that was the issue, that was causing that relationship to break down a little bit. But in the case of Potter and Weasley, it was an external incident which caused trauma to one of them, which then, resulted in a breakdown of the relationship between the two dogs. And we see this so much because, the dogs do have a life outside of the dynamic of the two of them. It's also the dynamic between the dog, each dog with the humans around them, each dog with the other social environment around them, which happens outdoors or during walks. It could be their health, it could be poor communication between the two of them itself. And I think it's very interesting because the two street dogs who do come and spend the most amount of time inside our house, they both are amazing friends outside. And actually there are three of them. There's Laddu, Lady, and Bala. And Bala usually spends outside the threshold of our house. He never enters the house because again he's scared of the other two. Laddu and Lady do spend time inside our house, but all three of them are amazing friends and a great group outside, outside the boundaries of our house. But the moment they enter the house, the things change drastically, to a point where Bala is scared of Laddu and Lady. He never enters the house. Laddu is very, very possessive of me and Zoe. So he doesn't like Lady coming close to either of us. And he starts growling. So it's very interesting how the dynamic change just by change in environment, like the environment that they are in. It's not even that they have a bad relationship, or it's not even that they don't like each other. It's just the environment changed and the situation changed and the dynamic completely switches, to a point where there's like constant growling, and we have to like really calm them down. We have to like create distance between them. And it's so interesting because again this shows that the dynamics is also dynamic. So it keeps changing. It's very fluid, and it's not permanent and set in stone, which also can be a ray of hope to people who are listening and like struggling with their dogs probably having conflict, that it's all in passing and everything is changing, and it changes with change in internal and external states. So we can still make it work for everybody.
Again, when you were describing the situation where he's being very possessive of you and Zoe, it made me think, obviously he considers you to be a very important part of his life and resource. And so he doesn't want to share you. And that brings me to resources. Um, you know, not all dogs want to share. I'm very fortunate in that Teddy is brilliant at sharing most things, unless it's actually in his mouth. He's happy to share. He does, however, expect his friends to be respectful of his toys, as I've seen once or twice, where he looks at me if his toys are being used roughly. He looks at me as if to say, I'm not happy, and I have to very gently intervene and do a swap, because he feels that one of his friends is getting a little bit too carried away with his toys, which I think is delightful, because he's happy to share, but he's got some expectations as to how they must treat his toys. So but again, that's just the kind of thing, isn't it, that we really need to be sensitive to. How would we like somebody to come in and just start helping themselves to the stuff in our fridge, and without I mean, we would consider that very rude, wouldn't we? Would we not?
Absolutely. And you know, Teddy's story kind of reminds me of how my husband and I both are obsessed with stationery items. And we are crazy about pens and pencils, and we collect them. And I think that's the one thing that we both don't like sharing with each other, because I'm very possessive about my stationery, and so is my husband. So, you know, if he takes a pen of, you know, that I'm using, I wouldn't appreciate it at all. So I kind of get Teddy, right? And if someone is borrowing a pen of mine, I would like it to be used. And I think I've had this feeling forever, I guess, you know, where, you know, use it nicely, use it properly, return it back to me, you know, in a proper condition. And I think it's only fair that our dogs, you know, feel the same, because uh, a lot of dogs do not have, in the first place, so many resources that they can feel like this is mine, and I love this is mine, I'd like to protect it with all my heart. I don't think a lot of dogs even have that many, you know, resources to even say, oh, this is mine, I'd like to keep it nicely. um I think one other challenge that I think a lot of households which who have a lot of dogs is to be like, and I'll give this example with the example of bed, right? Dog beds. So there's a, you know, this is Sammy's bed, this is Zoe's bed, this is Laddu's bed. But how do Sammy, Zoe, and Laddu know that this is their beds, right? I think they look at it as a bed that they can rest on, or a space that they can rest on. um so I think there's already, dogs already have very limited resources, then we limit it when there's multiple dogs saying that, you know, oh, this is this dog's bed and this is that dog's bed. How do the dogs know? And then how there is going to be conflict, because there's already like limited number of resources for the dogs to rest on, or to feel comfortable in, or to use to play with. um humans who are busy, and they can't find the space to find connection with their humans. Whatever little time that they're able to connect with the humans then becomes such a precious time that they do want to protect it, they do want to, you know, enjoy it to the best that they can. So I can see why a lot of dogs end up um, developing this resource guarding, this possessiveness around resources, because one, it's very valuable, human connection is valuable, safe spaces are valuable, food valuable. So I can see why they would want to protect it. So in case of Laddu and Lady, what we started doing is, and I think this is counterintuitive, because a lot of people who see dogs who are jealous or dogs who are possessive end up being like, okay, you fix your behavior a little bit, then I'll connect with you again, right? Like, you know, time out. What we did was opposite of it. We gave a lot of love to Laddu, we gave a lot of love to Lady. There was no shortage of it, no shortage of it in any form, so that, you know, uh, they don't ever feel like, okay, this is already in shortage and now it's taken away from me, so I have to protect it even more fiercely, right? So I think it's so counterintuitive, but it worked for us.
It's to me, it's not counterintuitive at all. It is obvious because lack creates competition. And so if there is plenty, you are much more likely to succeed in helping the dog feel confident that their need is going to be met. And really, this is ultimately what we're talking about. I said I'm very fortunate that Teddy is very happy to share um, just about well everything, um, and he is. But that's because Teddy lives in a household of abundance. You know, he loves playing with his toys. He loves his toys, but there are lots of them, and you know, he has fantastic food that I cook for him, and there's no lack. Teddy does not know what it's like to experience lack. and I am available to him. So, of course, he finds it easy to share because there's no lack, no scarcity. And I think for the most part, his friends are like him. They're very good at sharing because they too come from households of abundance, abundance of everything. Um, one or two might be a little bit more reluctant to share their humans, but even then, that's not a big thing for them. So I think this is the difference, and what you're describing there makes absolute sense to me. That you want to say to them, it's okay. There's plenty for everybody. There's plenty for everyone. You're taking away that insecurity, that fear, and building that trust. And I love that. I love that you're doing that.
Yeah, I think that is probably the crux of having one dog, multiple dogs, it doesn't matter. But I think building trust and letting the dog know that they are safe in all ways. They have the space to come to us and know that whatever needs that they have will be met. And if it is not, and I know I think this is also important to like point out that we may not be able to meet all their needs at all times. It's not possible, and of course, because we have other commitments, we have other responsibilities, we have our own needs to like think of. So it may not be possible to meet all of their needs at all times. But the fact that we can recognize, like for example, I've been dealing with some kind of physical pain and I'm undergoing physiotherapy. So today when I was doing the treatment and the exercises, so we have the physiotherapist come in and then he's making me do the exercises. And Zoe is a dog who loves connection. She needs to sit right where you are, right? So if I'm sitting here and if I had enough space here and if she was around, she'd be sitting right next to me, right in front of me, right on my lap, right? So this is the kind of need that she has. So she came into the room and she was like, okay, I want to like jump and sit next to you, but I was doing my treatment and it was not possible to let her there. So I was like, okay, not now, right? And she immediately listened to it and went and slept on the other bed. And that's the power of actually meeting the needs for most part of it. That when you say, now maybe I need to take a step back and maybe I can't meet your need now, or I might have to meet your need in a different manner, not how I would normally do. I think they also trust that. They also would take it into consideration, saying that, okay, I respect it because I trust you that if you're saying no, you have a very good reason for it.
It's so true. And one of the things, it, when Teddy was a puppy, if he grabbed things that I didn't want him to grab, that was not going to result in a gain. It might result in a swap, but not a gain. And he quickly learned that if he wanted to play, he had to go and get his toys. And so the rule was that if Teddy grabs a toy, we play, and that's good. But he's now 9. He's not a puppy anymore, and he does know that sometimes I can't just drop everything to play. But if I say to him, just wait a minute, let me finish what I'm doing and we'll play, he will sit patiently with his toy and wait for me to play with him, which is just the sweetest thing to see, because he is patient, but that's because he knows that I'm going to play. So ultimately, what our conversation today revealing is that, as with most things to do with our dogs, building that trust and building that relationship is going to make a huge difference when we are hoping to introduce a new dog into the household. And part of that, in fact, the large part of that, is understanding their needs and working to meet their needs. And then it may take a while for them to adjust, but you stand a much better chance.
Yeah. And I think I also think that even when it's also important to also recognize the space repair, the role repair plays, because we didn't start at this positive note that you very amazingly summarized our conversation. We didn't start like Sammy and Zoe didn't start at that space. We started it after the fact. We started after bringing the dog, and a lot of effort was put in after it. So there was a lot of repair work that we did. We built that relationship after Zoe came with Sammy, because we didn't have that, the kind of relationship we ended up having in the later part of his life was much better than in the first part of his life. So I think the reason I'm adding this is also to let people know who have already brought home a dog without their dog's consent, or without having the dog's opinion in the entire picture, or where they have had like a breakdown of the relationship with their dogs. I also want to point out that it's not too late to start. I don't. I also want to point out that repair plays such a big role in relationship building. I think to acknowledge that, I'm so sorry I did this. I'm so sorry you're not comfortable. I'm so sorry that we didn't do this before, but we will do it now, and we will do it to the best of our abilities now. And I will take care of your needs from now on. I think is also a great place to start.
Perfect. I think that's such an important ray of hope for everyone. So, Jania, thank you so much for your time today. So precious. Now, if people want to find you and ask you for help or just learn more about what you do, how do they do that?
So I am on under the name Dog Promise, DOGPAWMISE, on both Instagram and Facebook. So they can reach out to me on both places. I also have a website under the same name, so www.dogpromise.com, and they can find all information about me there as well. And I would be happy to chat with anybody and reach out. I also do international consultations, so if anybody wants a private consultation, I'm open to that as well. So I'd love to have any conversation about dogs with anybody who'd like.
Thank you. That's absolutely clear. Your love for them shines very, very clearly. Thank you so much again for today.
Thank you so much, Anna. I had lovely time talking to you.
Thank you. And thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.